Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's our Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have our regular contributors, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show. Okay, and hello, Jonathan. And we have also our own Ivan Kucherenko from Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello.
Hello. The question number one: do you have any videos to show us today?
Yeah, I've got even two videos, and first of all, it will not be about chief of China coming to Moscow and his meeting with Putin, not about Xi, but about another visit, which was recently. It's rumored that Putin, or probably his double, visited Mariupol. It's a common thing that a criminal like to visit the place of his crimes, and I just want to start out today's show with a video about Mariupol and what Russian army did with that city.
Excellent. Let's do that.
Двоих детей они спасли.
Very powerful video, Ivan. I was watching and thinking about a fate of Russia in wars. and apparently so disastrous history no other country has in all history of the world. Even take even First World War. Surprisingly, Russia is a winner of that war because it was on the side of Entente of France and England, and later on United States. So it was a winner, but it ended up a loser because Lenin with his Bolshevik crazes, they said, no, 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 the peace is the most important thing because we have to retain our power. And to retain our power, we need peace at any price. So, in fact, while France and England were winning against Germany, or at least holding their own at the front, Russia made a separatist peace with Germany, actually surrendering a colossal territories, including Ukraine,
Yeah,
by
the
the
Treaty
way.
of Brest-Litovsk.
The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. This is a horror story. There is hardly anything more horrible in the history of the world than this treaty. Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, one thing I would add to that is that Russia not only uh, lost in terms of having the Bolsheviks come to power, but they surrendered soon enough so that the Germans were able to transfer
Absolutely.
significant portions of troops to the Western Front in time for their last desperate offensive uh, in March 1918, using their newly developed infiltration tactics. And
Yeah,
while they did not have quite enough, yeah, they were trying to defeat the West before American troops could arrive in sufficient numbers to turn the tide. But the British and the French were able to hold off or contain those last offensives so that the Germans could not obtain a decisive victory on the Western Front, even with reinforcements from the Eastern Front and their new infiltration tactics. So it was still a close run thing.
well,
But the early surrender of the Russians, which kind of suggests to some who are alternate history strategists and war gamers, that that the correct thing for Germany to have done, uh, looking in retrospect, a better strategy would have been for the Germans to stay on the defensive on the Western Front. Don't even bother to launch any major offensives. Just throw all your weight against the Russians until they buckle, with the aim of defeating them in 1916 rather than in 1917. And that would have had a really significant outcome for the West before the
and
Americans
from
got
the
to
east too, and from the Russia, it would be very
Yep.
different history. Yeah. Now take Second World War. So Russians are celebrating actually the biggest celebration in Russia all these Putin's years is celebration of victory in the Second World War. How can you celebrate a victory while losing 27 million people? What kind of victory is that?
It's called a Pyrrhic victory.
It is.
Like I say, if the gods see fits to send them another such victory, they are undone.
Yeah, well, I don't think that they will get any victory in Ukraine, though. Ivan, what do you think is happening right now?
Uh,
Ukraine is preparing offensive against Russians slowly but surely.
yeah, I just want to come back to the Russian celebration of their victory. Actually, they celebrated victory not in Second World War, but they celebrated victory of their own war, which they named Great Motherland War, in order to distinguish from the Second World War and to erase a part of history, actually, in which Soviet Union made an agreement with the Nazi Germany in order to grab the part of Europe, and they actually were an allies until the moment when Nazi Germany decided to break that agreement and actually to attack their ally. So it's the thing Russia is doing in Ukraine now on occupied territory. They are trying to erase the history, to rewrite it, and to to broadcast their own version of history, like in George Orwell's 1984. And but nevertheless, here in Ukraine, we're preparing for the counteroffensive, and we are keeping the Bakhmut. Russian army can't take this small city, the eastern part of Ukraine, for 8 months already, though they've destroyed it. This city actually is ruined, like they've previously destroyed Mariupol, that they previously destroyed Marinka and other cities on the east of Ukraine, and like they were trying to destroy Kiev suburbs, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, and other Ukrainian cities in the beginning of that full-scale invasion. But we believe that our counterattack will put a piece of will show the whole world Ukrainian bravery once more, and show that the truth is actually on the Ukrainian part, not on the Russian one.
Very well, Ivan. Jonathan, any comments from you?
Well, I'm fully in agreement with Ivan in that, and I'm just that my only speculation is just how soon will the timing and the place of the counteroffensive occur, and I'm still tending to go against the majority opinion or the majority consensus that seems to think that they will not aim for Crimea, although there's a significant number of people who think that Crimea is going to be cutting it off and retaking it will be the primary objective. There are also others who will say that they're going to concentrate in other areas of Ukraine, possibly in the area starting in the area of Bakhmut itself. That would be, to my mind, too direct and too obvious. But taking the big prize, which is in this case cutting off and retaking the Crimea, would, again, from my perspective, seem to be the bet, because the Russians are in the position least able to defend it. They don't have the resources to supply it by sea. They certainly don't have air superiority, and the quality of the troops that are there sitting in defenses is questionable, to say the least. It's not like their morale is sky high.
Jonathan, maybe another way of working Ukrainian counterattack is not even invade Crimea, but cut it off. If they will cut off, say, east of Mariupol, they will cut off to the Crimea, and not even to attack Crimea, but isolate it. And what Crimea is going to do without water, electricity, of course, provided that breach is not going to last for long, so the breach will be a history, and so the Crimea will just surrender. I mean, there is nothing else that they can do about it. So could be, in some scenarios, may not be even necessary to attack Crimea itself, just isolate it, and it will fall to you just by itself, and very quickly. On the other,
it's actually sorry. It's actually a plan, and Ukraine is already showing that the supply chains via Crimea can be easily broken. Currently, Russia is supplying around 70% of all their war needs via the railroad in Crimea, and yesterday the railroad station of Jankoy was attacked, probably by some Ukrainian forces, and the large amount of Caliber missiles was destroyed on that railroad station, as it's stated by Ukrainian Defense Intelligence, and these were those missiles which Russia launched from the Black Sea Fleet, and which they are using to attack Ukrainian energy infrastructure and to bomb Ukrainian cities and civilian objects. So we already are preparing actually for cutting the supply chains for Crimea, and when they will be cut off completely, then probably it will be not very good situation for Russia, because they will have a great challenge how to supply Crimea without a railroad via currently occupied territory of southern Ukraine, and via the Crimean Bridge, which actually will be destroyed at the moment.
Ivan, I've read one publication by one of the Western generals. I don't remember the name. I think it was published in Foreign Affairs. And he analyzed the Russian strategy during the war and what they'd done and so on. And he believes that the easiest way for Russia to be successful in this war, not to attack in the first days of war Kiev directly, but go around Kiev and cut off supplies and isolate Kiev from the rest of Ukrainian territory, which would a much realistic plan than to attack Kiev directly, where, by the way, interesting thing I just found out yesterday, that General Zaluzhny, he had plan of defense of Kiev, and he didn't share it with any Western or American generals because he was afraid that they are so pessimistic that they could start to criticize it or so on. So therefore they would disclose at least not all plan, but parts of the plan and so on. So he had it completely hidden from anybody. And therefore, when Russians started direct attack of Kiev, they were doomed because the defense of Kiev was worked out so well. Jonathan, have you read anything like this?
I hadn't
No?
particularly
Okay.
seen that particular piece of yours that you mentioned. However, for the Russians to have tried to, that one plan for the Russians trying to bypass and isolate Kiev, that the fallacy of that would have been that the Russians would have had to have had the logistical capability to sustain it. It would have required a greater logistical capacity and for resupply, and to support an encirclement of Kiev. And they were obviously not capable of doing that. They weren't even capable of sustaining the direct attack on Kiev. So
Yeah.
trying to pull off an encirclement would have been beyond their capability.
And actually, of course, it contradicts Putin's plan to take over Kiev in 3 days, 5 days, 7
Right.
days, something. So they would really quickly.
Yeah, actually, I've read some kind of analytics about the defense of Kiev, and I watched several videos. Kiev was almost circled by Russian troops. There were only one direction which was safe for logistics to Kiev. It was the southern west of Kiev, the route to Odessa, and it was the only safe route to Kiev in the end of February and in the beginning of March, because on all other directions there were Russian troops, and probably their plan actually was cutting off Kiev, the logistics of Kiev, and making some kind of blockade of Kiev. But apparently Russian troops themselves encountered the logistics problems because they were not very well prepared for supplying such huge amount of troops on such a great distance from their military bases, and in the conditions when Ukrainian guerrilla attacks destroyed their logistics supplies, when they didn't have enough forces to guard all their logistics routes, and they were completely destroyed. And we've seen those great lines of Russian tanks which just stayed on the roads or in fields without any fuel and without any ammunition, and Russian soldiers they just left them, and then Ukrainian farmers take their tractors and steal those tanks and those Russian vehicles. It's not kind of a joke. It actually happened in the situation when Russian didn't have good logistics for supplying their troops. So it worked another way, not for the Russians.
You'll be surprised. I read an interesting Russian publication which compared German Leopard 2 with Russian tank Armata. And what they're saying that Armata is superior to Leopard in all directions. It's faster, it has more firepower, it's so great and so on. So the question...
Well, the problem is the Armata has Russians in it, not Germans.
No, the problem is, if you remember several years ago, there was a war parade on the Red Square, and there was a tank Armata, but it had to stop halfway through the Red Square. It couldn't move any farther. So they had people actually to help it to get out of the Red Square. So anyway, so the question then was, if it's such a great tank, are you using them in Ukraine, and how they're performing? They say, no, we are using them in Ukraine because we are very proud of our tanks, and we don't want Ukraine to take them and figure out all secrets how they were built.
There is a joke about it that Russia is not using Armata tanks in Ukraine because they've built them for a war, not for a special military operation which Russians are conducting in Ukraine.
That's almost like the old joke about the Russians working on perfecting a nuclear suitcase. They've got the nuclear weapon, they just can't perfect the suitcase.
Yeah, that's a good joke. So now we are witnessing this visit of Emperor Xi to Russia, to Moscow. So he's been entertained by Putin. Now, second day, they're discussing, rather than that, they're discussing how great friendship they have and their brothers and so on. So I don't know, okay, they're brothers. We heard that many years ago. We heard it all the time. So they're brothers. They're still brothers. What? Or why do they have to repeat 45 times in a row that we are great brothers, we love each other, and they're brothers? So of course you're brothers. You're not sisters. You're brothers.
Nobody can hate like brothers.
So the only thing is that normally one brother is bigger and older than another brother, and I think even by the way how they look, you can easily see that Emperor Xi is a bigger brother than Putin. And so what Putin really wants from China, the arms, the budgets, the money, and the missiles. What does he actually want, Jonathan? Do you have any idea?
It's really hard to tell just what China would be able to supply, unless they're going to supply Russia with the basic stuff that they need to continue to sustain it, such as, are they going to supply them with large amounts of ammunition? Are they, no matter what it is they are going to try to supply them with, the problem is that the Chinese logistical system isn't necessarily that much better than that of the Russians, and for them, and certainly not as good as that of the West. So even if China were to try to supply Russia with enough logistics to sustain its current level of effort, what the Chinese would lose in terms of their standing with the West, it would just galvanize the West, the rest of the Western nations, world nations, against the Chinese as well. And the Chinese do not necessarily think that Russia is worth putting themselves that much at risk for. So,
And also,
especially
John,
if Ukraine manages to launch a successful counteroffensive in the meantime, that raises the stakes for the Chinese, and they don't like that.
well, one of the numbers that I'm looking in the morning when I get up is okay. So you see the market, how's Dow Jones doing, how's this doing, but then I also look at Ukrainian Pravda. It's a Ukrainian Truth, and they always have a column when they see how many Russians were killed the previous day. So in the last several days, there were at least 1,000. It was 1,040, 1,060, but at least 1,000, more than 1,000 every day. Now, last 2 days, and I mentioned that in our program, there was only 700. And I start to think about what's happening with Ukrainian grinder. It has a rest. It has maintenance.
It's running out of things to grind.
Yeah, it ran out of meat to grind. No, yesterday it was 980, very respectable score, but it has to be at least 1,000 a day or more, because it sounds perhaps very I should say inhumane. So because it looks like I'm happy that so many Russians are being killed, but I'll tell you the objective of any war to kill as many enemies as possible. Unless I'm missing something. But this is the objective of any war, whether it's 500 years ago or 500 years from now. How you win the war? You destroy the enemy's army. How else you win the
And
war?
Clausewitz was saying that in his book on war, that you need to defeat the enemy's ability to wage war. And I like what General George Patton once said. It said, no bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country.
Exactly. So the meat grinder now is getting ready for more and more meat. The meat is still there, although there were sounds like Prigozhin is very unhappy about not being supplied properly by all the ammunition, and so he's not as effective as he could be. Then there were other rumors that Prigozhin wants now to join Ukrainian army. So we'll see to that. Ivan, have you heard anything about that?
No, but I just want to keep that idea you've told. And one of Ukrainian heroes named Roman Ratushny, he died in the battlefield, and he was only 24. But before his death, he said that the more Russian we will kill now, the less Russians will have our children to kill. So actually, it's a goal of this war until they're not going to stop, and until they're sending their troops to Ukraine, and until the majority of Russians is supporting this war, then we have no other way just to keep killing them. And every Ukrainian every morning is happy about those numbers of killed Russians, and the more this number is, the more happier Ukrainians are.
Excellent point. Yeah. So I think we should end our today's program with your video, if you allow us to look at it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
– 14 января нанесен ракетный удар по системе военного управления Украины и связанным с ней объектам энергетики. Все назначенные объекты поражены.
Бабуля, на мене падає дом. Все.
Коли люди ще кричать, і дітки, це ще не саме страшне. Саме страшне, коли вони вже не кричать, вони лежать, вони дуже погано вже реагують.
The war tragedy has accompanied the name of almost every Ukrainian city in the news for a year now. January 14th, Dnipro. According to the latest figures, 45 were killed, including 6 children. 79 were injured, including 16 children. A horrifying statistic, but the most terrifying thing about it is that it only shows the number. We can get used to seeing numbers. This is why it's important to remember that behind every statistic is a human life. 9-year-old Miroslava was leaving the store with her grandmother and decided to play with her friends. She later became a part of a statistic of injured children.
Це були рвані рани, там уже не було одягу, там уже не було шкіри, там уже кістки були невооруженим оком видні.
Miroslava was saved by her neighbor Svetlana Yurievna, who rushed her to the hospital.
Мені 61 рік. Я повинна зараз життя починати з нуля.
Anastasia was in the same building with her parents and her cat. All except the girl became part of the statistics of the deceased.
Я розумію, що мої батьки на той момент були на кухні разом. І я починаю їх кричати, звати, і розумію, що кухні взагалі немає.
Anastasia already lost her boyfriend because of Russia's war against Ukraine. He died during the counterattack in the Kharkiv region. Russia has taken everything from her. February 1st, Kramatorsk. A Russian missile hit a residential building. 4 people were killed and 18 were injured. Dmitro is one of those 18 injured people. He had returned to Kramatorsk to help his sick parents. He was rescued from underneath the debris. His parents were visiting their friends during the shelling, so they were unharmed.
Йому пощастило, плита його прикрила, здавила тіло, але не дала розрушити всі органи і тканини.
The war rages on. Every day. Unfortunately, you'll keep seeing new numbers of killed and wounded people. But don't let yourself get used to these statistics. These aren't just numbers. Don't get used to war.
Ivan, thank you very much for this video. There are a lot of human tragedies, and they are not just numbers, they are real people who fell thanks to the tyrant Putin and his madness. I hope it's not going to last much longer. I think the Ukrainian offensive will take Ukrainian army to the borders of at least 1991. And that, by the way, doesn't spell the end of war, because Russia can still continue a fight, but it spells the end of Putin. That's for sure. And with that, probably the end of war also will come. I hope so. And thank you so much for today's program. And we'll see you all on Friday. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Bye.
Bye-bye.